Alright, I decided I'm gonna go there. Capitalism versus communism in China. That is going to be the topic of this episode of Qi Life, as well as some other things. It is going to tie in with Qigong. So I'm here on the Bund in Shanghai, and you can see behind me very famous skyline here with some of the tallest and brightest and shiniest modern buildings in the world. And then if we turn around and we look in the other direction, we're going to see some quite different architecture, some older architecture, more of a European sort of look to the buildings. And there's some interesting history there. I'm not sure if I'm going to talk about that in this video. Maybe it might come up, or I might talk about it in another one. But yeah, I am going to be talking about capitalism versus communism in China. And I don't know if I'm going to post it straight away, because YouTube has this thing of deranking and not letting people see videos or even whole channels if someone dares to talk about something a little bit controversial in a video. And I'm a bit worried they might do that with this one. Not that I'm going to be saying anything too controversial, but hopefully some things that are illuminating about this. Because here I am, this city is all about trade. It's all about commerce and indeed capitalism. And yet I am in communist China. And we see, this whole city is a monument in a way to commerce and capitalism. So how do we reconcile those two things, being in a communist country, but with so much capitalism very, very, very clearly on display? Well, I think this is a great example of a particular Chinese way of thinking, which is really, really useful, and will apply to our Qigong if we let it, and help us to understand and comprehend some things on a very deep level if we allow ourselves to. And this is that the Chinese typically are quite comfortable holding two different, seemingly conflicting ideas, philosophies, positions at the same time. Generally, and this is historic as well as modern and current, they have no issue with having two or even more seeming conflicting ideas at the same time. Older examples of this, of course, are with religion. People will often, ask if someone, think of someone as maybe Buddhist or Taoist, or maybe Confucian. A lot of Chinese were all three, and saw no conflict between being both Buddhist and Taoist, and then of course Confucian philosophy as well. And yet in the West often we think of things as being, you can't have both things at the same time, but the Chinese have no problem with this at all. And if you understand those things well, hopefully you'll understand how you can how this can work for you, and how this can actually lead to a richer understanding for you as well. Nowadays Buddhism has grown in popularity in the West, and you will find Westerners calling themselves Buddhist, and occasionally you'll find people who are Christians calling themselves Buddhist Christians as well, because they understand that they can take on Buddhist philosophy while still following another religion or an aspect of religion and so on. Anyway, back to, and I'd say the same thing particularly goes for Taoism. Because Taoism, depending on how you want to look at it, is this philosophy that just helps you to understand life, which can fit along with anything else. But back to the topic at hand, talking about communism and capitalism. So specifically this, these things seem opposite. And so one of the areas where this is really, really valuable is in actually finding harmony between opposites. Rather than seeing them as mutually exclusive, seeing them as things that potentially feed into each other. And this is going to go beyond communism, beyond capitalism, into every aspect of life. You might remember in one of the recent vlogs, reasonably recent, it was about yin and yang and misconceptions about yin and yang, and people having this misconception that they're in opposition to each other. They're not in opposition to each other. Ideally, they should be in harmony with each other, or at least they're only in opposition to each other when they're not used skillfully. Used skillfully, they're in harmony, and they actually feed in to one another. So if we look at the modern situation in China with communism and capitalism, so early on, I'll put in a shot here, there's a sign just across the river of, it's a 70th anniversary. It was just a few days ago, 70th anniversary of the Communist Party here in China. And so they had a big celebration, and that actually caused the conference that I'm going to be delayed. It was going to be in May, and they delayed it all the way until October because of this. So back in those earlier days of communism and the Communist Party, I guess the policies were very, very overtly, clearly communist. The idea was that everyone should be equal, everything should be shared amongst everyone, and so it was very anti-accumulation of wealth, and they had all sorts of policies of equal distribution of wealth and everything like that. Now that is clearly not what is happening in China today. We have people accumulating huge amount of wealth. We have, rather than everything being dictated by the government, we have lots of free enterprise. And why has the Communist Party allowed this to happen and yet still call themselves the Communist Party? And I think a big part of it is that they saw that the way they were implementing their policies were not working. People were not, it was supposed to be for the good of the people, the good of the common worker, and they weren't getting good results for the common worker. They saw that in order for the common people, everyone to prosper, that they needed to do things in a different way, and they saw the success of capitalism elsewhere in the world and saw that this was a way that it could overall lift everyone, but they would have to apply things in a different way from how they had previously. So now this is no endorsement at all of Communist Party policy or things they've done or anything, but when you look at it in this way, you can see how these two seemingly conflicting ideas can be resolved together. That they can still be communist, but applying capitalism as a way to lift the common man. Right? Hopefully that's not too much of a stretch to see how that works. Now, personally, I guess here I will talk about some of my personal views. Do I think there have been issues with how communism has been implemented historically, both here and elsewhere? Absolutely. There have been significant issues, and looking at history, there's no way I think anyone can argue with that. But do I think there have also been issues with how capitalism has been implemented here and elsewhere in the West, which is more known as a capitalist sort of society? Absolutely. I mean, going back many years ago, we can see issues with how capitalism was used, and certainly in the last 10, 15 years, I think we're really seeing pressure on that system and poor implementation of those capitalist principles. So it doesn't have to be about one or the other being right or wrong. I think there's a lot of capitalists out there who agree with a communist sentiment in terms of they want everyone to do well, right? In fact, some of the biggest capitalists are some of the biggest philanthropists as well, donating, creating charities to try and do good in the world. It's a question of what do you do in order to have that happen in the best way. And this is where when we understand this harmony and opposites, and we understand having opposite ideas sit side by side, they don't have to be one true, one false. It's about understanding the idea and the concept and how it can be applied skillfully. And this is how yin and yang is or should be applied, and other concepts as well. Because in the end, it's about creating health, it's about creating harmony, it's about creating well-being, vitality, and all of that. This is in financial things, social things, everything in life. I guess on a personal note, you know, if you have had things to do with long white cloud Qigong and some of the other things that I've done over the last few years, you'll know that I have done the vast majority of my work on what I have called a give freely, receive freely basis for it's 7 years, over 7 years. And I did that because it was something I wanted to do. It was something that philosophically I feel strongly attuned to. That I think there's great value in that, and a whole range of reasons why. If you're interested, you can look at the givefreely.com website. I wrote some articles and posts and stuff there about why I was doing it and thoughts on it and so on. And essentially what this means is that people would use my services, the things I offered, sometimes even products that I made available, and pay or donate, pay whatever it is that they chose in return for those. There's things to do with making it available to everyone, particularly those who need it most, freedom, people choosing whether to value something or not, and so on. And amazingly, I did manage to keep it up for 7 years. But in the end, it was not sustainable. It wasn't sustainable along the way, but I was very, very determined. And so I am now at the point where I am changing how I do things, simply because I need to, in order to be able to do the most good that I can in the world, to be able to reach the most people effectively, to be able to provide my services, the things that I teach at a high level. I need to do things in a different way. And so that's in a process of transition at the moment now. So I can resonate very, very strongly with some of these ideas about harmony and opposites, because as I'm doing this, as I'm shifting, my personal business dealings from a donation basis to a basis where there are going to be set prices on things, and in fact there already are on some things, and there will be on much more in the future. It doesn't mean that I have abandoned that philosophy or that idea that I want to be able to reach people as effectively as I can. I want, if anything, I'm doing this because I want to reach more people more effectively and do more good by doing this. But I also want those who need things most to be able to access them, and so on. And I want people to be able to, set value on things, choose for themselves. Freedom is a big aspect of it as well. So, anyway, hopefully some interesting musings, maybe possibly a bit deeper than some of the other vlogs will be on this trip, but you never know, there might be some other pretty deep ones as well. Really interesting place to be, really beautiful spot with the skyline here. I hope you've enjoyed the vlog, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.